Welcome to Podcasting Smarter, the podcast for podcasters by podcasters. Podcasting Smarter is the official podcast from Podbean, featuring podcasting interviews, best practices, and helpful tips. We're here to give you the tools, resources, product updates, and news to help you get started podcasting and keep your podcast growing.
Building an engaged listener base. Engagement. What are some top strategies we can share for growing and maintaining an engaged listener base, especially in niche podcast markets? So I think this was a question from one of our Twitter friends. And there is a podcast for every niche. Let's be clear about this, right? Like, we love using the comic book example, but there are podcasts that are so specific. Last year, we did a virtual event with Kiernan from DNA Today. She has a podcast all about DNA. That's her whole thing. And it's so cool. And if you want to learn about DNA, like, that's the podcast. And so I think that, first of all, go hard on your niche. I want to start there. I've already started. I'm jumping in. And I have a few more things to say.
That should be sure. Go hard on your niche, Podbean.
Go hard on your niche.
It's just commit to the bit.
Commit to the bit. No, because those are your people, right? Those are your people. Those are your audience. Those are your true fans. That's your true community. And so it's really important that you make sure that you're serving them and that you don't try and dilute your content or your messaging for an audience that may not be the right fit. So that would be the first thing I say. And I have a few more things to say, but John, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that probably when we think about marketing, we think about engagement, we always think about the growth side. We don't often think as much about the retention side, right? And I don't know if that's one of my catchphrases, but I've said that a lot over the years. But the retention side, I think, is probably the part that's the most active part that you have to do as a podcast host. You can put out your content, that's great, but you have to do a lot of work to continue to engage your community, right? You may have a lot of people who are just diehard fans of what you're doing, but you may have other people that at the moment are passive that may turn into diehard fans over time because of the rest of the audience, or maybe there's a lot of different things that you do. I think it starts with your show. I think it starts with your show and creating ways for people to support you, like we talked about earlier, but not just financially, but maybe, for example, if you're saying, hey, there's a segment on my show where I say, if you leave a review, I'm going to go ahead and shout you out on the show, then you go ahead and shout people out like that. It makes them feel like they're helping you build your brand. They're part of that community. Another thing is, one thing that I will always say, probably 99 times out of 100 is a fairly successful strategy, especially when it comes to niche markets. Think about what discussion board you're going to use to continue to engage with your audience. It could be a Facebook group. It could be a Discord server, whatever the case may be. And there's other things out there, but figure out what's going to work best for your audience, figure out what's going to work best for your topic, and create a group where not just you go to engage, but other people can engage and help develop the community too. It's so understated how powerful it can be if you really cultivate a group, cultivate engagement in that way, and grow and scale up from there. Because no matter how much money you throw into your podcast, no matter how much promotion you do, being able to be active in your group and have brand ambassadors for your podcast and for your brand that continue to deliver your message. We used to call those street teams. We probably still do to some degree, but having this dedicated fan base that you're cultivating in one of these engagement groups and all the things that you're doing is going to allow you to continue to grow that base, because it's not just you saying these words anymore. Maybe you're the one who's stirring the pot, cultivating the group, but over time, it becomes your engaged listeners. It becomes your hyper-focused audience who helps create those topics too, who help you with things and who help you build your audience. So one like hyper strategy, especially for a niche market, is figure out one of the engagement engines that you're going to use, one of these groups, one of these discussion boards, and really go hard on that kind of community. And any social media engine has their own things for it. If you're someone who's doing things on Twitch, then just be consistent with your time and be consistent with what goals people can do. If you're doing on YouTube, similar thing. But really, if you're trying to do the discussion board thing, you give people the opportunity to create lots of different topics about lots of different things in your niche market. And then also that kind of comes back to you. You may go back to that group and that discussion board and be like, wow, I haven't really covered that part before. Maybe I can bring that up, talk talk about the group on your show, and then all of a sudden you're off on another branch of your show. That just happened by having that engagement. The people in that discussion board are like, oh, the person brought that up on the show. So it's just, again, it's such a symbiotic back and forth relationship. We talk a lot about personal bandwidth. So you also have to really take into account what everyone's smiling. There you go.
There it is. Ding, ding.
We won the pot. We won the pot.
So we have to see who in the comments got it too. If no one did, then I'm making myself a shirt, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, John, the first question. Come on. It came out in the first question. We just didn't say it. You did so good. You held off until over 45 minutes in. It's great.
Until it had to be part of the conversation, and now it's here. But
like Mount St. Helens' way out.
With that part about the personal bandwidth, think about where creating that engagement and that community is going to fall within your podcasting responsibilities, right? Because if you're thinking about how much time you have to edit, how much time you have to record, how much time do you have to come up with content, one of those pieces that you should dedicate time to is creating that community. Think about how much time you'll have to invest into that, but also think about over time how much time you can have to bring people on board with you. So I would say if you're thinking about how much time you can dedicate to the podcast, that's one of the most crucial parts about it, like a grassroots way of going about it.
Roni, did you want to? Yep, I see the hand.
I did. Yes. Okay. So another thing when it comes to creating that engaged audience is that you want to go where that audience is. For example, let's go back to the comic book podcast. If you're looking for the diehard fans of Dark Horse Comics, which, is one of my favorite imprints of comics for those who know, if that's the target that you're going for, then go to the source, reach out to the particular industry standard, reach out to Dark Horse, for example, and say, hey, I run my podcast. We mostly talk about your comics. Is there a way that you can promote me in your newsletter? Or is there a way that you can say something about the episode that I just put out? I have a great example of this, but I don't know how you guys feel about product placement, so I'll hold off for now.
No, share the example.
Oh, cool. I get to bring out my new toy. Yes. Okay.
Say the line, Roni.
No, this is why I had to ask to double check first. So I know this looks really strange. It is called the FreeWrite Alpha, and it is an LCD screen. And when I type, it just shows my writing here. So then when I want to focus on writing, it is just this little doodad and it's not my computer. And what's great about this is that the people who made this were not just going around saying, oh, hey, we're looking for any and all writers who want to do this. They were looking specifically for writers who were in that kind of diehard spot of, okay, all I want to do is write. I have so much going on, but they were lacking the capability of doing so. They couldn't sit down at their computer. They're traveling a lot. So they managed to find their niche and they put out a couple different products. This is just they did a Kickstarter for this a couple years back and I finally just got it. And it's, oh my God, I'm so excited. But being able to really find that small little niche pocket for yourself and reaching to people who are also in that niche pocket, that's really great. But you also want to find the people who are creating that niche pocket, whoever industry professional, whatever show, whatever group, and see what you can do to connect with them there, because they'll be able to help you spread out to other people that are really dedicated to that diehard niche.
Yeah, that's a great point, Roni. And I think what you both said is really valuable in terms of growing and maintaining that engaged listener base. Don't be afraid. If you have a little budget, don't be afraid to reach out to people who are big in the space and be like, hey, can I pay you to endorse the podcast? Or, hey, do you want to be a guest on the podcast? Or if they have their own podcast, hey, do you want to do a guest swap? Yep. Or just don't be afraid to reach out to people. And it's all about community building. One of the top tips we always share about social media is reply to comments. A lot of it is making sure that you are spending the time with your community. And we say this because if you have a podcast about a certain niche, you better like it, right? It's got to be your jam. It's got to be the thing that lights you up. Because otherwise, it can start to feel like a chore. And then you get into things like personal bandwidth, where it doesn't feel fun or it doesn't feel engaging or it doesn't feel like it's something that is consistently manageable because it feels like a chore. So I think that's a really important aspect as well. And like John said, offer to read out reviews. Hey, if you write a review, we're going to start reading them at the end of the podcast. It also gets people to listen through to the whole episode. That's also a great point. Have a newsletter. I love newsletters. I can talk about newsletters all day, every day. We've done entire virtual events, I think multiple, on newsletters. So They're really important and valuable because it's more personal. It's going into the inbox. But you can highlight lots of things. You can say, hey, here's this week's episode. Here's why you're going to want to listen. But also, here's some other cool things in our community that you're going to love. Here's some other creators. Here's some other content. Here's some things we have coming up in future episodes. Here's ways to donate and support to the show every week. There's lots of different ways to engage with your community. But like John said, it's about personal bandwidth. Ding, ding. And it's really about what you can do that's exciting, that's consistent, back to consistency. Yeah. So I think that we've addressed a bit there, but if you have any follow-up questions, let us know in the chat. And next, I want to talk about content planning for shareable clips. We are in the age of clips. We're in the age of short order content.
Yeah.
Short form content. Sorry. I keep thinking short order like Waffle House, but no, it's short form.
What do you want with your short order? What do you want with your short content?
I just want a pecan waffle podcast. That's it. So in terms of content planning, let's talk about how to produce high value segments that are ideal for promotional clips. And this is something that I'm really passionate about, Roni, John. This is all of our wheelhouses. Yeah. Roni, why don't you start on this one?
Oh, goodness.
You want me to come back to
So here's what I'll say when it comes to, yeah, you might have to come back to
Are
me.
you sure?
My brain just went, whoop.
Okay. For me, in terms of share.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll come back. Roni, we'll come back to you. Gather the list of things, the wisdom, gather the wisdom. I think in terms of content planning, especially with high value segments, we're in the age of reels. We're in the age of TikToks. We've had a lot of content creators at Podbean specifically come on and talk about it. Kayla Moore from the Heart Starts Pounding podcast, she literally started her following thousands and thousands of people through her TikTok. That was how she created her podcast following. And that's specific for her niche, but and a lot of it was content creation with videos. And she had a kind of a video first strategy. But it's important to think about when you're recording, what are some things you can do to build in for clips, right? Can you timestamp episodes? Can you pull specific moments? Do you want to re-edit? Do you want to do a lightning round of questions? You can get short, snappy answers. When you're recording, even if your podcast is audio, can you record video just so you'll have those clips for social? For Podcasting Smarter, I'll just tell you, our in-house podcast at Podbean, which is a podcast on podcasting. Any question you have, we've probably got an episode answering it. And if we don't, hit us up, podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. But we record with video because sometimes people want those snappy little answers on our Instagram Reels. They want them on our YouTube Shorts, on TikTok. And it also offers us the opportunity to share those clips with the guests, to engage, to pad out our social strategy as well. So I think that's a really important aspect when you're recording. So even if you're audio, try and get video. And if it's not your main setup, see if you can get like a secondary view, even if you just set up your iPhone to get like a behind the scenes situation. That's also a really important aspect. And when you're planning out your content, when you're writing your questions for your interview maybe, or you're planning out your show notes, think of that when you're considering those short clips, right? That's what we do. So when we plan out our content, we plan out our questions and our content based on, hey, can we edit this question down to be a snappy clip? Hey, is the answer to this question going to be something we're going to be able to share on social in an effective way that's not a drawn out episode, but something that's going to directly address to our audience on a different platform? Roni, here we go.
Yes. Okay. I figured out what I was trying to say earlier. So regardless of how long or how short the clip is, whether it's something that's going to be 20 seconds long, something that's going to be a minute long, something that's going to be 3 minutes long, because TikTok lets you go pretty long now, you want to make sure that it's narratively satisfying the entire time. All right. So we've talked before about storytelling, about having the beginning, having the build up to the climax, and then having that little kind of drop off there to tie everything together. You want to make sure that every single clip kind of has that same, okay, we're getting into the topic, we're getting it more into the meat of it, and we're coming down to the final point of why it's so important. And then we say, okay, we have more clips coming, or to find out more, check out the rest of the podcast. So you want to make sure that the clip will feel good to listen to. If you leave people on a cliffhanger, or if it's just, oh, hey, you're reading off a list of facts with nothing else behind it, no emotion or anything, or you're just doing like a clip of 3 sentences and nobody really knows what's going on, people aren't going to want to listen. They're going to just like scroll past it, because we live in a sea of content. Everybody's attention spans are incredibly short. So you want to make sure that you are engaging every step of the way.
That's great advice. That's fantastic, Roni. I think that's really important as well. You want to grab your viewer, you want to grab your listener. What's going to draw them in? What's going to get them excited? Yeah. And that can be repeating the question, short answer with value at the end. I think it's something where it's going to be different for every show, for every podcast. Like you said, 20 seconds, 1 minute, up to 3 minutes. Yeah. But just know that like you can plan it out in advance as part of your podcast recording. So know that you don't have to create double content. That's always good to know.
Yeah.
And we have time for one more question. We've only got a couple more minutes, but this is actually interesting because today we're doing the AMA. And obviously if we haven't addressed your question, pop it here and we'll answer it in the chat. But also you can always reach out to us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. And we've got that email here in the chat as well and in the description of today's event. But the next question is, how do you effectively organize interviews and Q&A sessions to encourage guest interaction and create content that's both engaging and shareable? So on the shareable side, I think this comes back to what we were saying in terms of planning out your content, right? Making sure that when you're planning your content, are you asking your questions in a way that they can be chopped down and shared? That's a huge one. And in terms of engaging, it's in the chat, it's answering every question. On social, are you replying to comments? And not just like a direct reply, but are you engaging with the community, things like that. And in Q&A, you always want to keep it fun, right? I think that in today's modern world, it's especially like Roni said, in the sea of content, this just came to me. So if it's too weird, let me know. But I always think in the sea of content, be the octopus, right? Just be the octopus. Be the colorful, exciting creature that the kind of moves around that everybody, if you've ever been snorkeling, seeing an octopus is a big deal. So in the sea of content, be the octopus. That's what that may be too weird. I think in terms of guest engagement, you want to make sure that there's room to ask questions, there's room for personality, there's room for spontaneity, but you also have the structure of your content, of your format, of your talking points, and the value that you want to give your audience and your listeners. I think that's really important as well. Like today, right? Our AMA is all about value. What questions do you guys have that we can help you succeed in your podcast? So I think that's a really big one as well. Do you guys have any last thoughts on Q&A and the format of Q&A? I always love a lightning round.
It's one of those things where I almost felt like I had to put the mic down because you do so well with these. So for me, it's okay, here's the person that does everything for us. So just let Norma Jean go and take the reins on that personally. The only thing I can add is even think about just what we talked about earlier about being a great host with multiple people in the room, right? The experience that you're going to create going into it before you even hit record is something that you can do a lot of prepping for, right? So even before you hit record on the podcast, sending people, hey, this is usually the format for my show. Never underestimate how, even though you're putting a lot of content out, that the person who may be coming on your show may not have heard your show, may not be a longtime listener of your show, may not know the format of your show. So giving them those cues, hey, here's how my show usually runs, here's how I usually do the questions, things like that. It's going to help you because you know the format of your show. You know how you're structuring it. But then having them go into it and understand how you do it is going to make the post-editing process that much easier, the ability for you to get clips and things like that. So a lot of it, and again, maybe another catchphrase that I don't say too often, but it's something that I've said multiple times, is a lot of the best work that you can do is in your prep. It sounds like a lot. I know a lot of the prep work is what you do, Norma Jean. So I think that there's so much that can be said just from that content that you put together for Podcasting Smarter for that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also it's that setting yourself up for success, and an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Obviously, there's always going to be moments in podcasting, right? Like the microphone octopus situation. But at the same time, I think it's something where, oh no, I've lost them again. Oh no. I think it's something where, when you're
trying so hard, stop.
It's okay. We're good. I think it's something where in terms of setting everything up for success, you want to make sure that you have space and that you can always edit. And John, I also love what you said about in terms of being able to run a room or manage multiple guests or a panel. That doesn't apply to every podcast. But when it does, you just want to know that everybody feels heard. I think that's a really big one, that everybody has an opportunity to provide value and to state their expertise. I think that's a really big one. And to keep it moving. I think those for me, those would be the biggest ones. To let everybody feel heard, to stay on topic, and to keep it moving, to keep, especially live, right? Or if you're leading a panel or speaking at a conference, for example, you have to be very wary of time. So you want to just make sure that practice. You want to make sure that you have the time to practice and that you have the time to go over things so that everybody does feel heard, can share their expertise, and that the attendee or the listener is going to get that value. So be focused on the value that you're providing as well.
One thing that I'll also add is, we're talking about planning your episodes, planning content, things like that. If you go over to Podbean Academy, we have a lot of content on that for our How to Start a Podcast track, but we specifically have one about planning your content invest, planning your content, planning your episodes. Roni did a great job of putting together that content, and then you're hearing my voice basically regurgitating their words. But I think that between all of that, you'll get a really great insight on how you can structure your episodes, and by that, using that to also help inform your interviews. So definitely go check that out too.
And I love what you said. And in terms of planning that content out for a Q&A, which specifically this question is about, it's something where the platform is also going to be important. Q&As a lot of the time are live. You can ask people to submit questions in advance like we did today, but also you can run it on Podbean Live. You can run it on Discord. You can run it on several different streaming platforms. So just think about the interaction you want to have, the planning of it, the platform, the promotion. These are all things that you want to include. And if you do have one coming up that is live, you can start promoting it in your episodes. So just know that there's a lot of different ways to create that engagement. On social, make sure you have a call out for questions, things like that as well is really great. I think that's all we have time for today. If you do have any other questions, reach out to us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. I'm going to read our brief outro and then we will wrap up today. Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been so fun. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at Podcasting Smarter for our February live event, the Podbean AMA, where we've hopefully answered all of your podcasting questions. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Podcasting Smarter has live stream sessions like this one with top podcasters and industry experts. We also have exclusive recorded episodes on the Podcasting Smarter podcast. If you joined late or you want to have another listen to this conversation, you can replay this live stream on Podbean's YouTube channel, and on the Podcasting Smarter podcast, we'll have some episodes with some of your questions. This is just one of our live events, and we have some really fun opportunities for you to join our community. Coming up at the end of February, we've got Amplify and Thrive podcast growth tips from a Black-owned podcast business with Bethany Hawkins of Crackers and Soup. And in March, we've got an incredible event on Podbean AI coming up March 7th. And on March 14th, we have a great event on branded podcasting with the Royal Naval Lifeboat Institution and how they've created a podcast to celebrate the 200th year anniversary of the charity. Podcasting Smarter is brought to you by Podbean. We're a podcast hosting and monetizing platform and home to over 640,000 podcasts. To start your podcast, head over to podbean.com today. And like I mentioned, if you have any questions, you can always email us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for more podcasting tips and best practices. Happy podcasting, everyone. Thanks, John. Thanks, Roni. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Podcasting Smarter. If you have any podcasting questions or want to get in touch, send us an email at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. Thanks so much and happy podcasting.